All right, let's talk about one of the most complicated and frankly terrifying figures in all of Jewish history, the Hasmonean king, Alexander Jannaeus. He ruled Judea way back from 103 to 76 BC, and his story, well, it's a masterclass in contradiction.
So that's the big question, isn't it? Who was this guy? Was he a brilliant nation builder, a king who forged a mighty kingdom, or was he a bloodthirsty monster who slaughtered his own people? The wild and kind of disturbing answer is, yeah, he was both.
And this is the fundamental paradox of his reign. On one side of the ledger, you've got this military genius who expanded Judea's borders bigger than they'd ever been. On the other, you have a man who started a horrifying civil war. To really get a handle on him, we have to look at both sides of the coin, and we'll start with his ambition.
So, let's first get to know the great Alexander Jannaeus, the military commander whose wins were, you can't deny it, absolutely huge.
See, when Jannaeus took the throne, Judea had a major problem. It was stuck, completely landlocked. It didn't have any major ports. It was squeezed between the crumbling empire to the north and the powerhouse of Egypt to the south. This basically choked its economy and left it totally vulnerable. Jannaeus looked at the situation and decided, nope, not on my watch. His entire reign was driven by this one relentless goal, to break Judea out of its geographic box.
And wow, did he go for it. He pursued this with a kind of systematic, brutal focus, pushing out in every single direction. First, he makes a beeline for the wealthy coastal cities to finally get access to the sea. Then he pushes east into Gilead, north up into the Golan and Galilee, and finally swings south into the Transjordan. This wasn't just chaos, it was a clear and brilliant strategy.
And every single one of these conquests mattered. They weren't just land grabs. Taking cities like Gaza, that opened Judea up to all that Mediterranean trade. Conquering the Golan, that created a critical buffer zone against his enemies. Grabbing the King's Highway, that meant controlling a massive pipeline of tax money. And on top of all that, his campaigns brought scattered Jewish communities into the fold. In just a couple of decades, he turned a small, boxed-in state into a real regional power. But all this success on the outside was hiding a deep rot on the inside, and it was about to explode.
Because while Jannaeus was out there winning wars and expanding borders, a totally different kind of war was brewing back home. And this war would be the one that stained his legacy forever.
So here's the setup. The kingdom was basically split into two major groups. You had the Pharisees, who were super popular with the ordinary folks and were all about strict religious observance. And then you had the Sadducees, the wealthy aristocratic priests who ran the temple. Jannaeus, being both king and high priest, was firmly in their camp. He sided with the Sadducees, and in doing so, he pretty much alienated most of his own people. All that anger and resentment finally boiled over in the holiest place at the holiest time. Imagine this. It's the Feast of Tabernacles, and thousands of people are packed into the temple in Jerusalem for this sacred water-pouring ceremony. It's a huge deal, a ritual symbolizing prayers for rain and God's blessing. And then, in a shocking public act of pure contempt for the Pharisees' tradition, Jannaeus takes the holy water and pours it on his feet instead of on the altar. The crowd went ballistic. This was a deep, profound insult to their faith. And so they started throwing their citrons, these fruits they used in the festival, right at their king. Jannaeus' reaction was immediate, and it was horrific. He ordered his foreign mercenaries to attack the unarmed crowd of worshippers right there, inside the temple. They slaughtered 6,000 people. That was the spark. That single act of brutality lit the fuse on a full-blown civil war that tore the nation apart for 6 long, devastating years. We're talking about a national nightmare. Jews killing other Jews, neighbor against neighbor. The kingdom was ripping itself apart from the inside out. The historian Josephus later estimated that the total death toll from this war hit 50,000. 50,000. That's just an almost unimaginable number for a kingdom this small. But even after he finally won, Jannaeus wasn't done. His final act of revenge would be the thing he's most remembered for.
So after crushing the rebellion, Jannaeus decided he needed to make an example of the leaders he'd captured. An example so horrifying, it would go down in history as the definition of tyranny.
He had captured 800 of the leading Pharisee rebels. Their punishment wasn't just going to be death, it was going to be a public spectacle of pure terror.
He chose crucifixion. Now, you have to understand, this wasn't a traditional Jewish punishment at all. This was what foreign empires did.
It was a method designed to inflict the absolute maximum amount of pain and public humiliation, saved for traitors and slaves. He was sending a message, loud and clear: this is what happens when you cross me.
And this is where the story becomes the stuff of nightmares. The historian Josephus describes the scene that followed. As those 800 men were slowly dying on their crosses, Jannaeus held a banquet, right there, in full view of the executions. He's reclining, feasting with his concubines, just watching the whole thing unfold, like it's entertainment.
But then, he went even further. To inflict one last, twisted bit of psychological torment, he had the wives and children of the crucified man brought out and murdered right in front of them as they were dying. It was an act of cruelty so calculated it's hard to even comprehend. Years go by, and then, as Jannaeus himself is lying on his deathbed, it seems like he finally grasped the sheer scale of the damage he'd inflicted on his own kingdom. His very last piece of advice wasn't about conquest or power. It was about peace. He told his wife, Salome Alexandra, who was about to become queen, that if she wanted to save the kingdom, she had to make peace with the Pharisees, the very people he had spent his life fighting and butchering. It was this stunning last-minute admission that his entire reign of terror had been a catastrophic failure.
So this is what we're left with. The final balance sheet. A king who built the biggest, most powerful Judean state in history, but did it through acts of unspeakable cruelty. A leader whose greatest accomplishments are permanently welded to his most monstrous crimes.
And that really leaves us with the question, doesn't it? Can you ever build something truly great on a foundation of such horror? What really measures a leader? Is it the size of the kingdom they build, or the unity of the people they lead? The story of Alexander Jannaeus certainly doesn't give us any easy answers.